Story 1. I mostly just avoid talking with them any more than is absolutely necessary. Story 2. Ignore them. If you cannot ignore them because it is at work or something, ask them to provide data that proves their point. I am an engineer and I get a lot of contractors trying to say they can do my job better. Maybe some of them can, but when it comes to putting my stamp on a drawing, I am not going to risk my license over something because the contractor has been doing this for a long time and knows better. I often say, if you want to send me your calculations, I will be happy to look them over and see where our disagreement is. I do not mind being wrong, but I need proof before I risk my license. 100% of the time they say, I do not have calculations, and I say, well, I do, so I guess I will need to go on that. Story 3. Keanu Reeves said, I'm too old to argue with people. If someone comes up to me and says 2 + 2 = 5, I'll say, you are absolutely right. Have a nice day. Story 4. I like to irritate them quietly. Most people who think they are smart have loud booming voices, trying to bully others into agreeing with their talking. They also tend to thrive on attention. When dealing with them, it is best to speak with a flat voice and use phrases such as, oh, I see, or that's interesting. Doing this infuriates them because you are not overtly taking their side and do not appear to be flattering them. I find it quite comical. Usually, they will lose interest in trying to speak with you and instead seek out a weak-minded or very gullible person to impress. Story 5. I usually leave brief, to-the-point comments on their Reddit threads. Story 6. With kindness and generosity, I am probably not as smart as I think I am either, so I will treat others how I would like to be treated. Story 7. Never argue with unintelligent people. They will drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. Story 8. Let them keep talking. They will hang themselves eventually. Story 9. Think of how unintelligent the average person is, and realize half of them are less intelligent than that. George Carlin. Story 10. By exploiting their misconceptions without feeling guilty about it. Story 11. I consider them lost souls and try not to deal with them unless I absolutely have to. Trying to explain anything will make it worse, so stick to superficial topics and the bare minimum if you have to be around them. Story 12. Only when necessary, I try to influence them into believing that the idea was theirs, regardless of the topic I need to discuss. Story 13. I am a network engineer and deal with this a lot. It is not that they are not smart. It is just that they are more confident in their assumed knowledge on a subject than they should be. This usually shows itself in the persona of Bob in accounting who knows how to change the fuser in the laser printer so he thinks he understands all the network systems. This person will make many assumptions, start spreading incorrect information that people act on, and then when I arrive to make a change, there are many consequences to address. The best way to deal with people like this is to make them answer their own questions. They usually start all of their answers with I thought, I assumed, or I was guessing. I do not like humiliating people. I prefer to teach them the proper channels to manage things for their own benefit. Story 14. This is a good post. You should do more like this. Usually, I compliment them and tell them to continue what they are doing. Story 15. It is a lot easier to avoid them now that so many have on their Make America Great Again hats. Story 16. They can be difficult to manage at times because they are usually the loudest about being intelligent and think they are the only ones who are right about things. Takes a lot of patience. However, they can also be good people. I do not treat them any differently from anybody else. It is not their fault. Many people are not capable of self-awareness and growth, and that is okay. It does not change my life. Story 17. As long as they are not being rude, I will hang out and mind my business about this self-perception. Story 18. I try to stay calm and ask questions to encourage deeper thinking. Finding common ground helps a lot and makes the conversation easier. Sometimes, I share my own mistakes to show that it is okay not to know everything. However, if it feels like a lost cause, I step away and save my energy for better discussions. Why waste time when not everyone will see things your way? Story 19. I deal with a client at work who is constantly boasting about himself. There is a running joke in the office that we should take a shot every time he mentions he has a Master of Business Administration degree and special security clearances. When he starts talking about how impressive he is, I respond with complete silence to the point that it becomes awkward. This has helped reduce the time he spends telling me how smart he is. Story 20. I have noticed that the least considerate people are often those with the most knowledge, and they use it to belittle others. I tell them, you realize this is a conversation, not a competition, right? Story 21. Generally, I post a reply to the Reddit threads they start. Story 22. I like to keep saying, I understand, very politely, just to see how long, deep, and wide the chasm of insanity stretches. Story 23. I have been told by quite a few people that they think I am intelligent. I do not consider myself particularly intelligent, but when you encounter someone who genuinely believes they are smart and they are not as sharp as they think, it is painful. If I knew anything about the topic they were discussing, I would ask them questions I already knew the answers to. If they answered incorrectly, I would start pointing out flaws in their logic or debating their thesis. Most of these people are not capable of understanding that they do not know everything and will argue that black is white and white is black. It was very draining, so I stopped engaging with these kinds of people, or I just act like I do not know anything about the topic at all. A quiet life is an easy life. Story 24. By allowing them to get themselves into trouble, then simply correcting their mistakes and showing management how you resolve key issues, the so-called intelligent person loses credibility, so to speak. Story 25. In my experience, anyone who tells you how smart they are is someone to avoid. These are usually the same people who sit in meetings or training sessions and ask questions even though everyone knows the answer. They like to hear their own voice. In my working life, some of the dumbest people have also been the biggest narcissists. Story 26. Frequently wrong but never unsure. They are hard to deal with. Story 27. My dad is like this, and if you try correcting him, he gets very defensive and angry. I just let him be wrong at this point. Either he will learn or he will not. It is not my problem. Story 28. I like to ask them a question that I know they do not know the answer to, but I do. Story 29. Never argue with someone who lacks understanding. They will drag you down to their level and defeat you with experience. Mark Twain. Story 30. Avoid if possible. Otherwise, play to their weaknesses. It is often pride which is easily manipulated. Story 31. I just let them believe they know their place instinctively. Story 32. Paint them orange and elect them as president, apparently. Story 33. There are very few contexts in which you have to. There are also very few situations where this exact thing is played out in any meaningful way. Unless you are talking about situations where a person thinks they know more about a specific topic than you do, which is not really about being smart. In those cases, you should probably start by checking your own ego. Is the person saying they know more wrong, or do you just not like being told you are wrong and are being defensive? Story 34. I make fun of them in ways that go over their heads. It is quite amusing. Story 35. Assuming I am actually smarter than them, I respond with curiosity rather than judgment. It makes the whole experience more interesting, and my energy is not drained. I might actually learn something new. Story 36. Let them talk about a subject, then do actual reading on it. Ask detailed technical questions and watch them be wrong. Have sources cited on your phone to show them that they are wrong as well. Story 37. Isn't one of the basics of being truly intelligent questioning that intelligence and knowing that you do not know everything? Story 38. I am afraid that in answering this, I will qualify for the subject matter. Story 39. You respond in the comments of their Reddit questions with a reply similar to this. Story 40. Act confused and ask questions that serve as breadcrumbs to guide them toward what you want them to do. Do not feel bad about it. Story 41. Avoid as much as possible. If you need to disagree or prove them wrong, present facts and remain very neutral emotionally. Do not directly say that someone is wrong. Just state the facts and support them with data. Sometimes these people are difficult, but many toxic individuals believe they are smarter than they are, so be careful around them. Story 42. I pretend that I am unintelligent so that I can see how deep their lack of understanding is. Story 43. I have to deal with one every day. The owner of the company I work for. He inherited it from his father and has no actual understanding of the business we are in, artificial intelligence, but loves hearing himself talk and lectures everyone around him. I just say yes, okay, or variations of it and then go about my day making the correct decisions. This avoids having to hit him over the head with a brick. I choose my battles carefully. Story 44. I typically encourage them to post about how smart they think they are on Reddit, where such comments are well received by people of similar intelligence. Story 45. Avoiding. If that does not work, ignoring. If that does not work, pretending they are right and trying to move on. If it is something really important like concerns about racism, arguments, and sometimes ridicule, in the hope they will not speak about that theory again. This is basically how Harris handled Trump. It is a very annoying type of people, especially if you are smarter and know exactly how wrong they are. Story 46. Avoid them as much as possible or reduce their intensity depending on the circumstances. If it is related to opinions, especially politics, I will not even bother to fact-check because I know they are not receptive to it. If you want to say something incorrect about a topic I am knowledgeable about, I will call you out. Story 47. I implant foolish ideas in them and observe how they make themselves appear even more foolish. Story 48. I just look at them blankly for a second, then say, "That is literally the dumbest thing I have ever heard." Then I walk away before they can respond. After a couple of times, they stop sharing their foolishness with anyone. Story 49. Reflect their ideas back to them with probing questions. This can help them see gaps in their reasoning without feeling attacked. Story 50. I argue with them online until they resort to petty insults, death threats, or, in one case, outright say they are going to harm me and my wife. Then I block and report them because their behavior is unacceptable. Story 51. Just let them be delusional. You can never win a fight with an ignorant person. Story 52. In person, avoid them entirely. Online, I respond to their comments like everyone else. Story 53. Generate questions of medium difficulty. Enjoy watching them struggle with their answers. Story 54. Come on now. You know everyone else knows everything, and you know nothing. It is such a narcissistic world nowadays. So sad. It is their way or the highway. No wonder there are so many ignorant people these days. Story 55. Agree, then double down with an absurd conspiracy so they understand what it is like to be the reasonable one. Story 56. Usually by asking questions until they give up. How do you deal with people like that? Story 57. Just ignore it. The world will confront them with reality. Story 58. I am just glad they exist. I am short and average looking. If the average person were smart, I would have no qualities. Story 59. Keep asking questions. They get lost in their own nonsense. Story 60. If it is someone I have to deal with regularly, especially at work, I typically do my best to put them in positions where their ignorance is on display so they hopefully get a clue and change their behavior. Sometimes it actually works. Story 61. I feel like it is the opposite. Most people are smarter than they think they are. A smart person will assume they are the least smart person in every room. For people who are closed-minded and shut others down, just observe and ignore. Intelligence is subjective. Story 62. I used to think I was one of the smart ones. Now I am just quiet. Story 63. It's like playing chess with a pigeon. No matter how well you strategize, they will strut around as if they have one. I focus on patience and humor, guiding the conversation while letting them enjoy their moment. Story 64. I do not know. I am one of those people except for mathematics. I am the best at mathematics. Story 65. Nod my head a lot, quickly forget the conversation, and avoid listening to them in the future. Story 66. Think of how unintelligent the average person is, and realize half of them are less intelligent than that. George Carlin. I work with physicians. The number of patients who read some incorrect article online and think they are smarter than the doctor who completed undergraduate school, medical school, residency, and fellowship, and has been practicing for 10 years, is nothing short of mind-blowing. I blame Oprah and Dr. Phil. There is nothing wrong with seeking a second opinion, but people, please. Story 67. Avoidance, if possible, is the only way. If they think they are smart, it is unlikely you will be able to convince them otherwise. Of course, you should also ask yourself if you are one of those people. This is not meant to be nasty or mean. It is always a good idea to test yourself and make sure you are not falling into bad ideas because you do not believe you can. Anyone can become foolish quickly given the right circumstances. Story 68. I try not to engage in meaningful conversation. There is one specific person at work with whom I converse very little, mainly because he tells long-winded stories and laughs at trivial things. Story 69. Excitedly ask them more about the main subject they are pretending to understand, as if you are genuinely curious to learn more. For example, if they are discussing something related to chemistry, show enthusiasm and ask them more about how it works. Usually, they will try to change the subject quickly. At that point, you can decide whether to let them or continue pressing until it becomes clear to everyone that they do not know what they are talking about. Story 70. I would wait until they showed their ignorance, then respond. I knew a man who was a self-proclaimed expert on everything. During the mad cow disease scare, he insisted that cooking beef until it was well done would eliminate the risk. I asked him what temperature defined well done. He said around 165 degrees Fahrenheit. I informed him that it required temperatures above 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit to deactivate mad cow disease prion. He was not pleased. Story 71. Create a social media website, name it Reddit, and attract users to it. Story 72. I let them go about their business as long as it is not negatively impacting me. Story 73. I don't. I find it very hard to put up with stupidity, especially these days when it is emboldened and celebrated by many. If someone is open and thinks critically, I engage. If someone is too unaware to realize their ignorance and doubles down, missing the point entirely or needing to be walked through basic logic, I mostly opt out. Those conversations just aren't worth it. Do not argue with an idiot or people will not be able to tell the difference. Story 74. Just let them keep talking. They will eventually shoot themselves in the foot. Story 75. My sister-in-law all the way. Mostly, I limit contact, and when I do talk with her, I try to keep it on benign subjects. If she goes off on something, I ignore her. She does not really like me and thinks I am unpleasant since I do not engage. Story 76. I let them do their thing. It almost always ends in shambles. Story 77. I am voting for the Indian woman. Oh wait, she's black now? Oh, I am voting for the black woman. Story 78. You don't interfere. You let natural selection and Mother Nature handle them. For example, how former President Donald Trump suggested injecting bleach to prevent COVID-19, and the belief that masks are intended to oppress people. They tend to clear themselves out if you just give it time. Story 79. I don't. I will just let them keep thinking they are smart and laugh about it later. Never argue with a foolish person. You will never win. Story 80. I watch my own ego. Even if someone is not as intelligent as they may believe, there can still be times when they are correct and I am wrong. They could also offer legitimate ideas I have not considered. Someone actually helped me out this week with a problem. So, I say judge ideas on their own merit, not the person sharing them. Story 81. If it is a friendly relationship, then I would ask questions or raise doubt about the topic. If it is a more adversarial relationship, then I would call them out on their nonsense. Story 82. Depends. Do they mean well? I am polite and kind. Do they just think highly of themselves but are not as smart as they believe? That happens quite often. Are they arrogant and trying to show off their imagined intellect? I subtly poke fun at them. Are they actively hurting others by being hateful and targeting minorities and trying to spread disproven, idiotic beliefs? I tell them in detail that they are very foolish. Story 83. Stop speaking and agree with anything they say because they are a moron. I am not wasting my breath attempting to enlighten them. Story 84. I like to listen to them talk and enjoy their foolishness. It is quite entertaining. Story 85. Wait. Truth always finds a way to come to the surface. Story 86. Let them be smart in their own world. It is not my place to kill their confidence. Story 87. I do not tolerate ignorance well. I have to leave these situations as soon as possible. Story 88. In the exact way I would want someone far smarter than me to treat me. Story 89. On a related note, I am over 40, and not once in my entire life have I met anyone who openly admitted they were not smart. Everyone thinks they are smart, and it is the other people who are not. I constantly look inward so I can recognize and accept my limitations. There is nothing wrong with saying, I do not know enough about insert subject to have an opinion on it. Story 90. Sometimes I use big words around them incorrectly and out of context to see how they react. In a few instances, they began to use them out of context as well, and then I send them out into the world to confuse others. Story 91. That's my ex. Well, it lasted only a month. I couldn't stand him. Story 92. It depends on the scale and the relationship I have with them. Maybe one of my friends has started talking a bit too deeply at certain times. He does have some autism. Story 93. I use the Jetly method. Yes, I agree. And move on. It is faster to agree than to prove a point to someone who thinks they know better. Story 94. Use sophisticated vocabulary, and you will observe that they become irritated immediately. Story 95. If I have to talk to them, I simply agree and move on. Story 96. I avoid talking to them, and if I need to talk to them, I let them believe whatever they want because they will likely not listen to reason. Story 97. To be fair, I am an expert in anything you do not know. Story 98. I just ignore them. I do not have the time or energy to deal with their nonsense. Story 99. I am a middle school teacher, quite literally my job some days. Compliment their confidence and have them quietly research. Story 100. 19-year-old me. Marry them apparently and ignore every time they said something unintelligent but with total confidence. 21-year-old me. Divorce them and just scoff. Story 101. Sometimes I just play dumb and act like they just taught me something. Story 102. With difficulty. Takes patience and it still does not pay off to be honest, but sometimes you have no other option. Story 103. Question them. When they say something insightful, ask them to elaborate. Story 104. I usually call them out just to be out charismatic and walk away with everyone thinking I am the dumb one. Story 105. I usually simplify my language to their level so they think I am the less knowledgeable one. It makes life much easier to put your ego aside for these people. Story 106. I avoid them as much as possible. I bite my tongue. It is difficult, of course. Story 107. I like to make them believe that they are the smartest person in the world. Story 108. Ignore them. Wisdom is realizing people are different, and the only effect they have on you is the level you allow them during conversational interactions. Story 109. It depends on what they are doing. I am not here just to burst their bubble. However, if they are routinely causing problems, I would probably give them a few doses of Socratic irony to help them understand what they do not understand. Story 110. If they are not smart enough to have understood the hint, it is highly unlikely that I will be the one who succeeds in convincing them to reconsider. Story 111. Apparently, tell them that their orange makeup and fake tan look good on them. Story 112. No meaningful content found to process. Story 113. I just laugh at almost everything they say with no explanation. Just laugh. Story 114. If they are in my team, let them lead, let them make mistakes, and let them clean up their mess. If they have any introspection, they learn. If they do not, the command chain learns they made a mistake. It is important to let them make small mistakes so that the damage is easily contained. If they are not on my team, it depends on the context. If you are trying to get anything done, they will only get in your way, so the less you interact with them, the better. Story 115. Live your life the way you are doing it and let society deal with it. Story 116. I think men and women might answer this question differently. Women do not always have a nod and smile or let them talk themselves quiet option when we are talking about an interested, persistent, narcissistic man. We have to do our best to avoid bruising those men's egos. I usually try to steer a conversation with those men towards something they are clearly not interested in so that they will lose steam and leave me alone. Story 117. Winning an argument against a genius is hard. Winning an argument against an idiot is impossible. Story 118. It is an exercise in class. If they are your friend, let them speak. Then ask them questions that allow them to explain themselves. Help them explore their thoughts. Help them help themselves. Takes class and patience. It is just as much a challenge of your quality and character to work through their shortcomings. Otherwise, you will quickly reveal yours. Story 119. These kinds of people are like unstoppable objects. You cannot do anything about them, and they just keep going. The reason you cannot defeat these people of immense stubbornness is because they do not follow logical steps. You, a smart person, use logic to tackle subjects, but you cannot defeat illogical arguments. With logic, they will always be the winner in their own eyes while you are confused and wonder why they think they won the argument even though their arguments do not make any sense. Also, they will not listen to anything you say, so there is no reason to argue with them. They do not take input, they just have output. Trust me, my brother is one of these people. It is no use. Never have I ever argued with him and afterward thought, actually he has a point. I say this because this is what happens when I argue with really knowledgeable, logical, or smart people. For example, my other brother. Story 120. Bite my tongue and try not to sweat too much while feeling the agonizing pressure to get the heck away as fast as humanly possible. All the while saying things like, as they try to explain things to me. Story 121. My sister-in-law is one of these types. She is not only far from as smart as she thinks, but she is also aggressively and obnoxiously so. I find the best approach is non-emotive acknowledgments and to let her slowly dig her own grave. Sadly, she rarely realizes she has actually disproven herself. Story 122. Maybe share a soda and a conversation. You don't have to hate someone just because they have character flaws. Story 123. Bully them. Target their insecurities. They have many. Publicly call them out on their falsehoods. The bigger the audience, the greater the damage. If you cannot do any of this for professional or safety reasons, ignore them. Story 124. You pat them on top of their head and say, "You did great today. Now run along." Story 125. What is the obsession with how smart people are or how intelligent someone is? Why is this so important to people? Do you think it makes you superior? Intelligence is on a spectrum, like gender or being born extremely athletic. Some people are simply better at processing information and learning. We deserve equal rights, but we are not all equal. Isn't it hypocritical to expect respect and equality regarding something like gender and race, and then turn around and insult someone? Story 126. If you are a member of the Republican Party, you elect him to be your president. Story 127. I just let them keep talking. I let them keep spooling out proverbial rope and looping it around their own necks. Story 128. Let them talk. They eventually talk themselves into a corner, and it is funny. Story 129. My favorite is, I am educated because I took a class on it in college. Story 130. I teach 10th grade, so that is what I do all day. Story 131. If the outcome affects me at work or personally, I usually end up being the person who always has to be right. Oh well. If not, I just let them figure it out on their own. Story 132. I do not know, they have not really shown up in my circle of friends. I guess I have avoided them well enough. So I guess that is the clue, avoid. Story 133. I cannot work with a group of people who never pick up a book unless they have to read it for a test. Story 134. I don't anymore. I used to be in a relationship with a man who was always adamant that I was using the wrong words to describe things. He would publicly try to embarrass me by correcting me and saying I was stupid. I just had a much broader vocabulary than him, and he didn't understand my words. I would even try to show him afterwards with a dictionary, but he would cut me off and ignore me. In the end, I got tired of it and ended the relationship, but it was way too late. Now, when I find someone acting in a similar way, I try to avoid interacting with them as much as possible. I no longer have the mental energy to deal with such behavior. Story 135. I have a colleague at work like this. I try to be nice, but sometimes it is hard. Honestly, I just ignore it and remind myself that knowledge is earned. Therefore, I do not correct him or give it freely. I let him continue in his ignorance and arrogance. Story 136. In work settings, I let them keep thinking they are smart, then capitalize on their mistakes when the opportunity presents itself. Story 137. It depends on how unaware they are. If they believe birds are fake surveillance drones, I will keep them around just for entertainment. However, if they try to involve me in the fraudulent check scheme at JP Chase Bank, I will remove them from my life. Story 138. I used to dumb down, but I do not do that anymore. They will be hard-pressed to get a conversation out of me now. Story 139. Hit them with, yeah, I hear you, but the hollow earth makes much more sense than the flat earth. Really though, it depends on the person, their temperament, and what they think they are an armchair expert about. Personally, I would double-check information taken from them and learn more about the topics, taking notes of your sources and being diligent regarding methodology. Remember, if you think you are smart, you are typically on the cusp of Mount Stupid. Story 140. I usually just say, uh-huh, or is that right? And let them keep talking. They usually tire themselves out. Once, I had a customer talk endlessly about Barack Obama, thinking I agreed with him. After 15 minutes, he finally asked me a question, and I told him he was wrong and a bigot. I recommend not engaging with people who do not reason, if at all possible. But if you have to, at least let them make their foolishness obvious to everyone around them. It is damaging to their cause if they appear as a buffoon advocating for it. Story 141. I marry their sister and spend a lifetime marveling at how foolish they are. Not really something to boast about, but that's how it is. Story 142. Depending on the information they are sharing, I usually try to ask open-ended questions to encourage them to keep talking until it becomes obvious to both of us that they do not know what they are talking about. I aim to do this without coming off as a total jerk, just a partial one. Story 143. You must be very intelligent. This was my dad's go-to phrase when in the company of such people, and it never gets old. Story 144. I dated one person for a year, and I still question what was going through my head. Story 145. I really do not. I will listen to them a couple of times, but after that, I am usually straightforward about not wanting to listen anymore. Story 146. I apologize. Sorry, I am not going to be able to contribute to this conversation, so I am going over there now. Goodbye. Story 147. This happens every day where I work. I am very polite, and as soon as they leave, I go to the back and silently scream. Story 148. Either simply not talking to them or force-feeding them contradictory information to hopefully get them to switch sides. Story 149. We have a person like that at work. He will say the wrong thing with such confidence that I almost believe him sometimes. I know he is wrong. I have done things the right way dozens of times, but he told me the wrong way to do it with such enthusiasm that I considered listening. Usually, I just ignore him and do it the right way. I have never heard him admit to being wrong afterward. Story 150. Sometimes I like to let them be in charge if the things they care about do not matter to me personally, just so I have the opportunity to watch it all burn. But mostly I just ignore them or hope they do not become my next boss. Story 151. Egg them on. I love these types of people and get the biggest kick out of hearing them talk. I think the Dunning-Kruger effect is an amazingly entertaining part of the human condition. Story 152. Challenge them with logical tactics. I don't really care, and we will get a beer afterwards, but I am definitely calling you out on your behavior. Story 153. Just nod and agree with them. Let them live in their ignorance. Story 154. Avoid them. These are the most dangerous people on the planet. Story 155. Ask questions and let them self-destruct. You need patience with this, though. Story 156. I avoid them like the plague and do not engage with them on anything beyond simple questions like, "What do you want for dinner?" I will turn my back on them and start talking to someone else if they begin trying to show off their intelligence. Story 157. If they hold no power over you, do not deal with them at all. If they do hold some power over you, appeal to their ego and influence them to do what you want. Story 158. I ask them simple questions like, would you take a flight around the world if it were nonstop? Or, let's assume you were given $10,000. Do you keep it? Or go for what's behind door number 3? It's fun to watch the confusion spread across their faces when you ask these questions at random, because then they stop and ask what it has to do with anything. If they answer, don't say, "That's what I thought," or anything like that. Just say something unexpected, like, "Thanks for your answer. We will be recording this on our satisfaction survey." And walk away. Story 159. I look in the mirror and tell myself we will get through this. Story 160. It depends on how ignorant they are. If they are mildly ignorant, I ignore them. If they are profoundly ignorant, I encourage them because it is funny. Mean-spirited, sure, but I really do not care. I have a coworker who is deeply involved in conspiracy theories and readily accepts multi-level marketing nonsense. Everything from standard Russian propaganda to doubting gravity because she does not understand what a scientific theory is. The other day, she started speaking fake German, complete with sounds that do not exist in the language. I am not fluent, but I know enough to have used a German manual to work on my motorcycle. My supervisor is aware that when I disappear for a few minutes during the shift, I am hiding somewhere laughing. It is like browsing the irrational older generation Facebook groups to laugh at them, but this does not affect my search algorithms and advertisements. Story 161. I do not feel like dealing with them requires any special effort. I just treat them like anybody else. Honestly, I cannot even tell who is and is not smart most of the time. It is not like I am giving people intelligence quotient tests or something. Story 162. Ask follow-up questions. They usually talk themselves into a hole in fewer than 10 questions. Story 163. They deal with themselves. They make mistakes and things blow up in their face. Give it time. Story 164. Minimize interaction, and when I cannot, just gray rock and be neutral with my answers. I love learning new things, and I do not understand people who think they know everything, especially if they are arrogant or willfully ignorant about it. Story 165. Depends on my mood. Sometimes I just nod politely and excuse myself at the earliest possible moment. Other days I might subtly challenge them by asking questions designed to unravel their faulty logic, just to see them scrambling. Story 166. Why do you need to deal with them? Just let them be and live your life. Story 167. Mostly ignore. But if they invade my mental space with their foolishness, meaning confronting me or challenging me, then it's game on. Story 168. Usually use it as a way to get menial tasks completed. For example, hey, we were talking and thought that with your knowledge you could come up with a way of counting out these brackets onto pallets for distribution. Story 169. As someone working on a Doctor of Philosophy in the social sciences, I have learned to ignore everyone, especially during voting cycles. I do not care about anyone's opinions or suggestions on a given matter or topic unless they are themselves an academic or have years of first-hand experience intersecting with those issues. It is like food enthusiasts who think they know everything about culinary arts and sciences just because they enjoy going out to eat. Social analysis is the same. It is easy to have opinions on society and its structures when you engage with them every day just by living in society. However, appropriate analysis needs to remain within the realm of professional, trained knowledge creators. Story 170. I try to understand what they need so they go with the best plan, and I'm not that smart. Basically, I lead them to the answer without making them feel stupid. Sometimes they don't deserve that. If they want me to do something in a foolish way instead of arguing or pointing out how unwise it is, I wonder aloud what would happen if a certain event occurred. Something I know will happen if the task is done that way. and then they connect the dots they should have already connected. Story 171. Accepted practice seems to be to have them star in a C-grade television reality show, join the Republican Party, run for president, win, lose, claim fraud, and repeat the cycle. Story 172. I do not talk about anything serious, and if someone says something unwise, I just ignore it and change the subject. More than 2 drinks, however, and we are in danger. Story 173. Keep asking questions. Eventually, they walk themselves into a trap. Story 174. I told an ex, "Too bad you're not as smart as you thought you were." She became very upset. Story 175. I am older and now speak out. Being polite got people nowhere. Story 176. People who think they know everything are annoying to those of us who do. Story 177. This student in my class approached me the other day and started mocking me. I have dealt with him every day since grade 9, so I called him an inbred blackberry and said he looked below average. Story 178. It is situational. Sometimes you have to give them an opportunity to prove how smart they are. Then, when they fail, you casually show them how foolish they actually are. Give these people enough rope, and they will hang themselves. Story 179. Do not argue with them. Uninformed people simply repeat their incorrect opinions louder and begin to bully you. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.